He wasn't a soldier, a king, or an artist. He owned nothing, commanded no army, and wore the same rough robe every day. And yet, for a brief moment in history, Girolamo Savonarola ruled one of the richest and most brilliant cities in Europe by the sheer force of belief. He wanted to purify Florence, to build a city so holy that even Christ himself would feel at home. Instead, he built a warning that still burns 500 years later. 1452, Ferrara, northern Italy. A boy is born into a family of doctors, educated, comfortable, and curious. Girolamo grows up intelligent but restless, fascinated by the soul's darkness more than by the body's health. He studies medicine, philosophy, poetry, the classics, but finds only vanity. In every lecture hall, he hears not truth, but pride, not reason, but greed. At 23, he abandons it all. He walks away from privilege and joins the Dominican order, a brotherhood devoted to poverty and preaching, while others chase art and love. Savonarola chases righteousness. He vows to speak only what he believes is God's voice, no matter who it offends. When he arrives in Florence, the city dazzles like a dream. It's the crown jewel of the Renaissance: marble cathedrals, perfumes, music, and light. The Medici family rules like gods, showering money on artists: Leonardo, Botticelli, Verrocchio, turning faith into frescoes, holiness into decoration. To the world, Florence is paradise. To Savonarola, it's the prettiest gate to hell. He preaches in the great cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, thundering that Florence has sold its soul for beauty. He calls the Medici corruptors, the artist tempters, the church hypocrites. At first, the crowds mock him, but his voice, sharp, relentless, cuts through laughter. The poor hear judgment, but also justice. The rich hear insult, but also prophecy. Within a few years, Florence starts to change its tune. The preacher who once stood alone now speaks to packed cathedrals. He warns that God will punish Italy, that foreign armies will invade, and that only repentance can save the city. When those armies actually arrive, Florence kneels to him. 1494, the French King Charles VIII invades Italy. The Medici flee. The city turns to the one man who seems to have predicted it all. Savonarola steps forward, not as ruler, but as messenger. He declares Florence a new kind of state, a Christian republic, guided not by princes, but by conscience. He refuses riches, refuses titles. He dresses in black, eats little, sleeps less. He becomes the living symbol of a purified age. But behind the holiness lies something subtler, the intoxicating taste of influence. People listen when he speaks, they obey, they fear disappointing not him, but the God they believe speaks through him. For the first time in history, a monk governs a city. Savonarola dreams of transforming Florence into the New Jerusalem. He bans gambling, luxury, carnival, and song. Children patrol the streets as angels, collecting forbidden objects: mirrors, jewels, cosmetics, musical instruments, even books of poetry. Those who surrender them are promised salvation. Those who hide them are promised shame. And then comes the bonfire of the Vanities. On a February morning in 1497, a mountain of wood rises in the Piazza della Signoria. People bring what they once loved: wigs, paintings, dice, perfumes, even manuscripts. As the flames climb, they sing hymns. The smoke rises over the city like incense to a jealous god. Art dies quietly that day, not by decree, but by faith. Florence begins to resemble a monastery. No laughter in taverns, no music at night, no dances, no feasts. Sermons replace songs, guilt replaces pleasure. Even weddings are judged for modesty. Savonarola insists he wants only virtue, not control, but virtue enforced by fear becomes control. He appoints moral inspectors. Gossip turns into confession. Neighbors report neighbors. Artists paint only saints. The same people who once lived for beauty now live to avoid sin. He has achieved what tyrants dream of, a dictatorship of conscience. In Rome, Pope Alexander VI, the infamous Borgia Pope, watches with growing fury. Savonarola calls him corrupt, calls Rome the harlot of Babylon, and preaches that the church itself must be purified or perish. The Pope forbids him to preach. Savonarola ignores it. He is convinced that obedience to God is a lot higher than obedience to the Vatican. When excommunication arrives, he laughs it off. I answer to heaven, not to Rome. But faith is fragile when mixed with politics. Merchants lose trade, artists lose patrons, nobles lose patience. The man who once felt like Florence's conscience now feels like its jailer. His enemies smell blood. A rival friar challenges him to a public test, a trial by fire to prove divine favor. If Savonarola's side survives the flames, he truly speaks for God. The crowd gathers, tense and trembling, but the spectacle dissolves into confusion. Hours of delay, then rain. No one enters the flames. No miracle happens. The people who once saw heaven in his words now see only smoke and stagecraft. The laughter he once silenced returns, cruel and loud. By nightfall, the mob storms his convent. The prophet who promised salvation is dragged through the same streets he once purified. Imprisoned, tortured, humiliated, the man of unshakable faith finally shakes. He signs a confession, then retracts it, then signs again. No one knows what he truly believed in those last days: God, justice, or the echo of his own voice. In May 1498, the Republic sentences him to death for heresy and pride. He accepts the verdict calmly. He prays, Lord, if my fire was not yours, forgive me. At dawn, the bells of Florence toll, the same bells that once rang for his sermons. And as they fade, so does the spell he cast over the city. The church calls him a heretic. His followers call him a saint. Reformers a century later, Luther, Calvin, call him a forerunner. Artists paint him as both martyr and madman. Florence, torn between guilt and nostalgia, erases him, then honors him again. Because history doesn't know what to do with those who try to save the world. They are too holy for power and too human for sainthood. Savonarola left no palace, no masterpiece, no empire, only a warning that when virtue becomes a weapon, even truth begins to burn. 5 centuries later, his fire still flickers, not in plazas, but on screens. We no longer burn art. We erase reputations. We no longer shout sermons. We tweet them. We no longer call it sin. We call it canceling. The human need to purify, to punish, to belong to the righteous. It never died. It just changed costume. Savonarola would recognize our world instantly, crowds demanding purity, sure they serve truth, unaware they serve their own reflection. We live again in a Florence of mirrors, brilliant, creative, terrified of imperfection. He began as a healer of souls and ended as their judge. He loved truth so much he couldn't see it bend. He wanted heaven on earth and forgot that heaven has no place for humans. And yet even in his failure, there is something noble. He reminded the world that ideals matter, but also that ideals without mercy destroy what they're meant to save. The fire he lit didn't die with him. It moved into every movement that believes it can purify the world, every revolution that starts with hope and ends with ashes. History burns differently now, quieter, cleaner, with better lighting, but it burns all the same. Girolamo Savonarola was not a saint, nor a villain. He was a man who mistook passion for holiness and the voice of conscience for the voice of God. He tried to turn faith into perfection and discovered that perfection has no heart. His story is not about religion, it's about obsession. Not about sin, but about what happens when you hate it more than you love life. In the end, he proved his own sermon true. Fire never separates the pure from the impure. It only reveals who was willing to burn